Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. This is Eric Erlinson with Unanet. Welcome. I'm going to give, it's just before 10 o'clock Pacific, 1 o'clock Eastern. I'm going to give just a minute or two more for people to join before I get going. But again, welcome, and I'll speak with you momentarily. Okay, looks like we've got quite a few people jumping in here. So just to get started, again, for those that are just joining, this is Eric Erlinson, Director of Business Development with Unanet. Welcome to our webinar today, which of course is going to be on the subject of DCAA compliant time and expense reporting, automation along with project accounting. I'm assuming that if you're on this webinar, you are probably either currently or planning on servicing government-based contracts let out by the government, most likely the federal government, perhaps state, local, but of course, as soon as we mention the term DCAA, we're usually talking about contracts let out under the federal acquisition regulations. So a couple quick housekeeping things before I jump in here. During the course of the webinar, my goal will be to impart, first of all, some background information before we get into the platform itself, both about Unanet and about the objectives of the Unanet platform in DCAA environments, and then as we get into the platform to show you how we meet some of those objectives. But as we go through this, a couple quick things. First of all, every once in a while, I mean, technology is wonderful, and I probably use GoToMeeting every day, just about, and usually it works like a charm. But if you seem to be experiencing any issues whatsoever, it's the old reboot is kind of the common fix to any minor technical glitches. And by reboot, I don't mean rebooting your computer. I just mean rebooting the session. That is, going ahead and just exiting the session and jumping right back in. And chances are, if you were experiencing any issue, that will probably fix it. Also, during the course of this webinar, you may notice that in the little GoToWebinar screen that you have, it might be sitting up in the upper right-hand corner. There's some various things you have there, including the ability to ask questions. All right, there's an item that if you click on the little arrow that says questions next to it, you do have the ability to go ahead and enter a question, hit enter, and it will come to me. Now, obviously an hour is pretty tight timeline to impart a lot of good info, so I can't promise to get to all questions, but I will try to monitor them as I am presenting, and where possible, answer them live. But please understand that any questions entered, if I'm not able to get to them live, they will be answered immediately following the webinar by directly communicating the answer to you via the email address or what have you that you entered in registration. Okay, I think that should be about all the administrative stuff. So again, quick bit of background before we get into how a platform like Unanet can help you in the DCAA environment. Let me first give you a very high-level overview of what the Unanet platform really is. At its fullest width and breadth, it can be a complete ERP platform for any company, whether they are a government contractor or a commercial firm. But in that, we cover a huge range of functionality, everything from the ability to plan out your business at at the corporate level, at a project level, at a person level, at a task level, wherever you need to plan at. so that perhaps we might, what we might be using that for is to plan out a notional, an opportunity pops up, and we want to take a look and say, hey, how might we prosecute that that potential opportunity? Maybe in response to an RFP that just got released, because we want to propose, or it could be an option year getting released on a firm backlog. And you want to go ahead and plan out how you're going to execute that, along with any changes that have come to that program. Well, Unanet will provide you the ability to do that, and then just so simply take that plan and with the push of a button, create an actionable budget from it and start accruing actuals. But along with being able to plan into the future, there's, of course, as soon as that project becomes real, the need to execute, and which is really the main area that we're going to be talking about today, at least in terms of the fact that in this single platform here, we also have the ability to accumulate those actuals by having our folks report in their timesheets, submit the expenses they might be incurring, travel, materials, whatever it might be, and have those go through extensible approval workflows that we'll also be looking at today that adhere to DCAA requirements. Lots of other things going on here at those levels, ability to collaborate through things, objects that we have called project notes and other things. Contract management, of course, is a big deal. And then in Unanet, one of many sterling features is the fact that all of this that you see here, whether it's those functions, the ability to monitor everything we're doing, at the project level, at the GL level, AR, AP, whatever it is, because everything you see here, including our invoicing, including our accounting functionality, our GL, our AP, our AR, and so on and so forth, is the fact that this is all in a single application. We're not, it's not a hodgepodge of individual modules that all had to be integrated together. Okay, it's all sitting in one place, running from a single database, and because everyone, no matter what function they are using here, is operating from that single database or within that single database, everyone else can see the results of the data that you are entering, modifying, or what have you in real time. So literally, as soon as I enter, let's say an hour or fraction thereof on some task on a project in my timesheet, and I save that hour in my timesheet, my project manager in their dashboards, in their reports, can see not just that hour, but the costs, the billables, everything associated with that time as I'm putting it into the system. All right, just one example of how real-time data comes into play. Now, because this is a platform that was built from the ground up with government contractors in mind, again, we have hundreds upon hundreds of pure commercial firms that also use it, but because of that focus, the need to manage, to be able to both structure and easily manage your cost pools and calculate those indirect rates, whether it's based on your actuals, to this very moment, or based on projections that you've created at some level going forward, maybe to forward project your rates for the following year to submit and get approved your provisional rates by DCAA. It's all sitting in the same system and is available to use in a real-time environment. As a government contractor, I'm not going to bore you with all the things I've got here. Some of this will become very apparent as we get into the platform itself. But as a government contractor, there are some things like SOC 2 compliance, but also, of course, this last year, as of January 1st, we all got to be very concerned about NIST compliance, 800.171. Our cloud-based architecture, all right, if you choose to use Unanet as a cloud-based service as opposed to an on-premise deployment where you put it on your own servers, we partnered with AWS in a NIST-compliant FedRAMP moderate environment. So, on the Unanet end, that is taken care of, and of course, all that documentation can be provided. Just to give you a feel for, who's actually using the Unanet platform today and in what capacity. On this slide, I've pretty much focused on example government contractors. I mean, we've got, and actually I think this number is probably a bit outdated because at the moment we're running right up on 1,200 companies using the Unanet platform across the U.S. and internationally. But the thing that the main thing that all these companies have in common, with a few exceptions, is they are all project oriented, which of course tends towards the professional service arena. But they range in size. I think our smallest customer is 3 employees. Our largest has well over 30,000 on the platform. So it's absolutely a platform that can address the needs of all levels of organization and then grow with you. You may recognize some names here, of course. And then just to give you a couple quick points about the Unanet company itself. You may or may not be familiar with us, but this is a privately held company based right here in the U.S. No external shareholders, venture capital, anything like that. It's just Unanet and its customers. I'm a previous customer of Unanet's, by the way, a former government contractor myself, and was a customer of Unanet's for 5 years at my last company. Had such a great experience. I came to join Unanet, but the point to being a privately held company, which is completely profitable, debt-free, what have you, has been growing 30% year over year for some time. Due to successful relationships with our customers, which really goes to, it's been generated by our extreme customer focus on their needs, on supporting them, on creating our entire product roadmap comes directly from the mouths, the requests of our customers, and as do any improvements, changes to our customer support apparatus. This company has been around supporting government contractors and commercial companies for over 30 years now. 20 years ago, actually 21 years ago now, the platform itself was first introduced, and of course has been expanded and improved over the years to meet the needs of those customers. Now, so we're here to talk today, of course, about things that concern us when we work in the DCAA audited or supervised arena. So things, of course, that we're interested are in a system helping with are things like controls. Of course, the fact that time, for instance, can't be recorded in advance, right? For direct government projects, right? When save changes to time data are made. Of course, complete audit trails on that have to be captured, and so on, along with so many other requirements that we see here. In the areas of access control, of course, we have many things that ideally DCAA would like to see happening. That limits to user data are enforced. That only the appropriate folks can get access to, as an example, someone's timesheet or expense report. That users themselves can only authorize what they have actually been approved to work on. Workforce authorization might be a term that you're familiar with, and so on and so forth. Workflow, of course, likewise, is a pretty important thing. They want to know that, like using a timesheet, once again, as the lowest common denominator, the most basic example, that as people are saving time, as they're submitting it, that it is going through the proper channels in the proper manner, and that trail, that process can't necessarily be circumvented. Contract support. Of course, as government contractors, contract management is a huge thing. In Unanet, we have so many features that assist in this arena, from the ability to generate enumerable pay codes to utilize for whatever functions required, to the ability to create unlimited number of general or project level labor categories, allowing you to apply rate schedules, so bill rates or even cost rates, by person, by task on any project they might be working on in the system, and so on. Again, functions that will help you automate the workforce authorization process and so on. And then, of course, as a government contractor, one of the huge things is that separation of direct and indirect costs. And we'll talk a little bit about how Unanet helps with that, because of course, on the direct side, the government needs to know everything that is allowable to be charged, whether it's labor, material, subcontractor charges, be they labor or material based, and so on. And then likewise, on the indirect side, we have to be able to prove to them that we know, really down to the penny, what is properly applicable to our fringe costs, our overhead, our G&A, and so on and so forth, so that when we are billing them at those rates that we have projected, we can prove to them that they are well-founded, and that then, of course, through the year, we need to be able to track the actuals, see where we are actually landing, which Unanet helps us with, because as we go through that year, Unanet can likewise help you as when's the last time your actuals actually tracked right along with your projections. Obviously that doesn't happen very often, but in the Unanet environment, in real time, we can see exactly how we're tracking, and if we stray, whether it's at the corporate, division, department, project, or person level, we can see that as it starts to happen in real time, and hence manage it far more effectively than we've typically been able to in the past. Okay, so with that in mind, as the kind of things that are important to us in a system like Unanet to help us in the government contracting arena, let's talk about the platform itself and some of the types of functions that it can bring to bear on these issues. With that in mind, the first thing I'm going to do is log in as a typical end user. And when I do this, what you're going to see here in this individual's Unanet environment is a very simple type of presentation. Because a typical end user, what are we looking for from them? We're looking for their actuals. Well, first of all, we're looking to notify them on what they're supposed to be doing. Okay, so this individual that I'm logged in right now as, Charlie user, we're extremely creative with our demo usernames, as you can see. One of the first things we might want to take note of is the fact that Charlie can come in here and he can see everything that he's supposed to be working on by going to, for instance, a workforce authorization report, and everything that he's been assigned to, whether it's the project manager that has planned him in, or some other individual who has authorization to plan particular individuals in the organization to different projects in the organization. Charlie can see that he's supposed to be working, for instance, on this brand strategy task on the content production project. He's actually been given some dates. He may or may not have been given a budget in hours to work on this, and so on and so forth. You can see variable cases here. We can see one here where he's been given right here, 126.96, very specific number of hours. He's used 15 hours. This is reflecting in real time what he's entered in time cards to this moment, and so he's got this much left. But now, by the way, when Charlie was assigned to work on these various projects and tasks, he probably also got an email notifying him of that assignment. All right, so the Unanet system can really highly automate these critical functions. So in something like that, or in looking at something like his calendar, he can see how folks have planned him out, where they're expecting he's going to be performing work on a day-over-day basis. But when it comes time to perform that work, of course, he's going to record that work in his timesheet. So if we go into a timesheet here, and by the way, the presentation of this timesheet may vary based on many things. Number one, is Charlie in this timesheet on a laptop or a tablet, or maybe he's on his smartphone? If he's on a smartphone, then he's more likely going to be using a mobile optimized view of a timesheet, all right, that's going to form fit to that exact smartphone format. But it might also vary based on the fact that you might have a weekly time card submission schedule, or you might have a bi-weekly, a semi-monthly, a monthly. But by the way, it might be different for different people in your organization. So Unanet does not care. The timesheet can be completely different periods. It could be a stub period. Maybe you've got folks working on alternative work week schedules, 980s, 4x10s, whatever it might be. The timesheet can be structured for that, and the timesheet can be different for different people if needed in your organization. Let me blow this up just a little bit more for you. Hopefully that's plenty easy to see. But in terms of not just recording your time easily in Unanet, but recording it properly, to direct or indirect projects, you may notice that over here by day, of course, I've got time cells to enter time in. Over here, though, I've got project and task columns to select the actual project that I worked on, and then underneath that project, the actual task or subtask that I was performing work on, on this particular day. Now, I can create an unlimited number of lines, by the way, in my timesheet. There's really no limit there. But notice that in addition to direct projects, i.e. contracts that I might work on or Charlie might work on, I've got some indirects also. So everything is a project in Unanet. Everything is created as a project that your folks can potentially record time against. Now, if I was, and we won't necessarily have time for this today, but if I was to get into the administrative side of the platform where you saw all the projects I currently had set up in Unanet, you would see I have far more projects than this, okay, that currently exist in this demo environment of Unanet. But Charlie, I'm actually limiting him. Okay, this is part of that whole control, the key control set that DCAA would certainly like to see you have in place. I have limited Charlie to only those tasks on those projects or contracts that I have actually assigned him to. Anything else he does not have access to. All right, which of course also just eliminates a lot of potential mistakes of Charlie entering information somewhere he shouldn't be. Now, when we get into the time side of the timesheet, and by the way, I should also mention there are other columns you can certainly make available. This is probably the most common format for the timesheet we see deployed, but there are other columns like pay codes. You could allow folks to designate their location that they happen to work on the task that day. You could allow them to designate the labor category they worked on that task under, or in this case, I've actually assigned Charlie to the labor categories in my assignment, so I don't need him to do that, and so on. These other columns that could be set into view mode and allow the user to edit them. But as I go to enter time against any task that I have performed work on today, there's a lot of options that come into play there too. The increment of time. For instance, if I enter something interesting like 2.37, you'll see that the system automatically rounded it to tenths of an hour. Now that's only because I designated that Charlie will enter his time in tenths of an hour. I might designate hundredths, tenths, quarters, half, whole hours. Again, it could be different for different people. I might also allow Charlie, or even require him, to enter his time instead of just entering time in that cell like that, to double click on his cell and use a time in, time out function, where he's able to come in and say, hey, I'm going to start working on the design task. Here we go. Now he might, leave Unanet right now. He might say, okay, leave Unanet, go work on this for a good part of the day, come back sometime later when he's actually stopping work on that to hit the stop button. Now, not even 1 minute has passed at this point, which the system's not going to allow you to record zero time. So let's just create, a more likely scenario where Charlie worked till 2:35. Okay, he hits OK, and great. The system calculates that for him. The gray cell means that time in, time out was used. So variable methods that your folks can use, or that you can require them to use for their time recording. But in the DCAA environment, DCAA regulated environment, of course, there are some things that need to be enforced in this arena, because since it is Tuesday today, for any direct project, of course, I should not be allowed to enter time in advance, right? That's a big no-no. All right, so a platform like Unanet can stop that. Now that is completely allowable, or may, depending on the regulations you're required to follow, that may be completely allowable on a direct commercial project, or say an indirect project. For instance, I could, it's quite all right if I go in here, for instance, and enter some time in advance on my vacation, okay, on PTO. Not a problem at all. That's allowed. Although notice at the same time that something else happened here. We got the system's barking at us about a bit here. It's just letting me know that I have a project here, the CRP upgrade project, that does not allow me to save time, or will not allow me to submit time. I just saved it, but it's not going to allow me to submit a time card if I've saved time to a project that requires comments, because every one of these time cells that you see here has a comment box attached to it, and we can actually require it. Now notice it did not require that for this project here that I entered time on, or the vacation project, just this one. So now if I say design review with customer, I save it. The system's now happy. A little green triangle lets me know there's a comment there. But as you see, I can require that, and these comments can be produced not just on a report, but even on an invoice if your customer requires all that detail. But other things that are pretty important about in the DCAA environment is, let's say I go to change, having saved this data in my timesheet right now, let's say I go to change information on a previously saved data point. All right, when I hit save, the system itself, being completely aware of the previous data now being written over, will go ahead and do that for us. It will record who made the change, when the change was made, what the old value was, what the new value was. And you could give your people lists of reasons, or you could require that they enter reasons themselves manually. That's the most common reason for the mistakes on my time card. Are now, as a result, that audit trail is being kept. There are, pre-existing standard reports in Unanet that if DCAA comes in for the floor check and they say, show me the history, all the time card history for Charlie here for the following, date ranges, that's no problem at all. In fact, if I go to preview, you'll see right here on this time card, great, there's the audit trail. All right, everything that happens with this time card is being kept. Now, we're not building much of it. We don't have much of an approval history, but if this time card had been passed up the chain, disapproved, and what have you, we would see that entire life history of the time card right here. Any comments entered, and so on. Again, you can see them here on the screen. You can produce a report for an auditor, piece of cake. But the bottom line is the system is doing this for you. Okay. Now, if I go back to the time card for just a moment more here, a couple other important things. DCAA requirement: folks must complete their time card on a daily basis, right? So, I'm sure none of you have problems with that, but what we provided in Unanet, just in case, are things like proactive notifications. Unanet can be set to actually look at everyone's time card, say, at the end of the day, okay? And if Charlie, for instance, hasn't filled out his time card with the number of hours that we would expect, then the system can email him at that time and say, hey, Charlie, notice you haven't filled out finished your time card for the day. Please do so ASAP. And there can be a link right to his active time card in that email. So he just clicks on the link. He's there. He takes care of business. Now, my last company, we had the system check again the next morning. And not only did it ping Charlie again with an email, and this time it had a slightly, let's say, more strongly worded message, but we also sent a list of delinquent users to their direct manager. So then they knew who the folks are that were delinquent, and they could go out and, let's say, lower the hammer, or give them a little push. At the end of the time period, the system can automatically notify everyone, hey, time to submit your time card. If they start dallying again, maybe a little bit later, you send them a reminder. So let's send a list of delinquent users to the managers. As soon as someone submits, Charlie submits his time card, the first approver in his approval chain can be notified again by email. Hey, Charlie's time card is waiting for you, and so on. So the system tries to provide as many reasonable tools to help you with these processes, so that as you document them, of course, the key here is that you've got to have process documentation that DCAA is going to approve. The system, has been built to ideally, codify those processes for you in a system that will enforce those procedures, and that will prove to DCAA that those procedures are enforced day in and day out. Okay. Lots of other things potentially we could go into the time card, but obviously with a limited amount of time, let's talk about a couple other things like expense reporting. Actually, right before that, let me talk a little bit about leave administration, because in the Unanet platform, we can also put your leave accruals here and Unanet, for instance. I have three. I have a PTO, straight vacation time. I have a sick time accrual, and I have a personal leave accrual. So every one of those, I can see exactly how they're building out in something like this. For instance, here's Charlie's ongoing, real-time report on his vacation time. Actually, let me go back to the criteria here and open this up a little bit more for you. Let's take the time frame back a little bit, and let's enlarge the scope out into the future a bit. And so now Charlie's able to see, so since back in August, how he's been accruing, how he's used his PTO. It looks like he's taking time off fairly frequently, and what he's got in real time as of today. But he can also see how it's going to build out, if all things being equal, how it's going to build out for him in the future. So if it's spring break, he wants to take the kids somewhere, he can see if he's going to have the hours for it. Then he can submit a leave request. See right here, add a leave request against that accrual. It's going to go through the same chain of review and approval as his time card, and so everything can be administered, managed right here in the single platform. And now, by the way, as a previous user of Unanet, one of the most powerful features of this leave request administration for me was in using the planning functionality to plan my folks into future work. When I was in a planning screen, I could actually see the days that Charlie wasn't available. The system would designate the days that he had approved leave and hence was not expected to be at work. So I wasn't trying to plan him into those time frames that he was gone. All right, in the expense side, we have the concept of both expense requests and expense reports. So the way we used this at my last organization was any travel or supplies had to be approved in advance. So I would have to submit a request to my managers, get that approved, then I could incur those expenses. Anything else, I could just report in the actuals after the fact. And of course, any approved request with the press of a button, that the details can be copied into an expense report. All right, we don't have to duplicate the effort there. But if we go into a typical Unanet expense report, actually one of the things I'm going to do here to show you the flexibility and power of the Unanet expense reporting is, instead of just reporting against a single project right now, I am going to go ahead and report against multiple projects. So let me add this one, and actually let's add an indirect project. It's not a training project. And over here, this allocation, and I'll paint the picture a little more effectively for you here momentarily. I'm going to modify my allocation percents. I'm going to save this, and then go back to my details screen. Now, once I do that, I now have several projects and tasks on those projects, in fact, that I can apply an expense against. And as a result of having multiple projects, I got this column right here, this charge to project column. So let's say the scenario is that Charlie traveled to Dallas, okay, and where customer 1 and 2 are both located. And while he was there, he spent 60% of his time over at customer 2 working on this project, and he spent 40% of his time over at this customer working on this project. So as a result, I can say, hey, this materials charge, perhaps that was something that should be charged just to this training project or just to this project number 1. Or I can say, actually, go ahead and split that up for my allocation automatically for me between these 2 projects, or even more specifically between these 2 tasks on these 2 projects for these different customers. All right. Or this, perhaps the subcontractor expense was Charlie paying for a subcontractor to conduct some training. So he's going to go ahead and charge that to the training project. Now, these expense types, like so many things in Unanet, these are all going to be created to your specifications and your needs. And these can also be limited. If a customer's, if a project, a contract from a certain customer does not allow any travel, then you know, perhaps airfare, lodging, those types of expenses would not even be available to report expenses on that project. Or if you want to limit Charlie, perhaps he's never allowed to use the entertainment expense, you can completely do that. So DCAA's, you know, idea of ideal controls can certainly be enacted here in the Unanet platform. We also, near and dear to the government contractor's heart, are things like the ability to deal with per diem rates. So right here in Unanet, we have a per diem engine built in. And through using it in conjunction with something we call wizards, expense wizards, which you'll see if I click on the amount, the dollar amount here for the lodging expense type, you'll see this additional screen pop up because I have attached a lodging per diem wizard that allows me to literally pick my location. Maybe instead of Virginia, we traveled to Uganda. So I can pick the location in Uganda, and automatically the system pulls the latest per diem rate from the U.S. government CONUS OCONUS per diem rate schedules. I enter my room rate and taxes, and as you see, what has happened here, because I have exceeded the allowed rate, is that the system has automatically parsed out for me the allowable versus the unallowable, or the billable versus the unbillable portion of those room rate and taxes, routes them to the proper accounts as a result of the GL, and ensures that, well, this amount will be billed to the customer, this amount will not be billed to the customer. Okay. Again, many other things going on here, but just in the interest of time, other, you know, pretty important functions within the expense reporting, of course, is the ability to attach expense receipts, whether we want to scan the receipt, attach a PDF, or you want to attach a Word document, or you want to just take a picture with your smartphone or your tablet and attach that. We place no limits on the document types. As a Unanet administrator, you could certainly place that limit for your own users. but the system, and its default configuration doesn't care. We also have the ability to, if you have corporate credit cards that are being used by employees, we can structure a feed from your credit card company such that, in this case, you see here's Charlie's card, designated by the last four numbers on his credit card. All the charges, the charges that have not been properly allocated to projects yet, are sitting right here for him to go ahead and pick those charges off of his credit card statement. Let's take Giant Food here and pretend that it is. Do I have a meal? A business meal. Okay, he can check the import, pull that right in, and as a result, that item, now because it's a business meal, there's other details required for me to enter, but you can see the details from the credit card statement have been brought in. And again, the real power for me at my last organization was the reconciliation of corporate cards to ensuring that all charges were properly allocated. Instead of printing out statements and going through expense reports, our accounting department was now able to just run reports in Unanet to see the charges on Charlie's card or across all the cards that had been properly allocated to direct or indirect accounts or had not been, and easily send that report to Charlie and let him know, hey, we really need this done ASAP. Okay, let me take a quick look. And I have a quick question here, and this I missed this one while I was in timesheets, but it says, is this timesheet part of a payroll system as well? So in Unanet, if we think back very quickly to that PowerPoint slide where I was kind of showing you all the functionality, actually let me pull that up because this is a pretty important point. Let's go right here. So if we note right down here at the bottom of this chart, oh, okay, that just out of there. Let's go to this slide. There we go. Notice down here, integrates with third-party payroll providers. So the way Unanet has approached this, because we do deal with customers, in all United States, across North America, Canada, what have you, and internationally, with massively differing human resource needs and workforce regulations from locality, state and local governments. What we've chosen to do is to create a system that basically integrates with every major and almost all the non-major payroll providers out there that you can think of. Your ADPs, your Paychecks, Paylocities, Payroll Network, Insperity, and so on, allowing you to pick the provider out there that can best meet your needs, whether it's just pure payroll processing, calculating the taxes and Social Security and what have you, and sending that information back to the GL in Unanet, or also providing your benefits administration and what have you. So we do not do that payroll processing. We send all the necessary data to ADP, Paychecks, etc. at the end of the time card period. That can be an automated through one of our Connect products, and then the GL entries, the journal entries come back from that payroll provider. It's a completely symbiotic relationship there. Okay, with that question answered, jumping back to the platform itself, what I was going to do at that point was log out from looking at Charlie's environment to what I will call kind of a mid-level management environment, because the question is, once Charlie had submitted his time, his expenses, then what happens? Because of course that part of the process is also very near and dear to DCAA. Now, by the way, this is a great place to talk a little bit about the Unanet environment from the standpoint of what you are actually seeing as I go from Charlie to this individual, Chris Director, happening on what we refer to as their dashboards. Every Unanet user might have multiple dashboards across the top here based on the roles that they've been given in the system. This individual has more dashboards available to them because they have far more functions that have been granted them and given access to more data across the Unanet spectrum, whether it's across different customers, across different departments and people and what have you. Each of these dashboards, as a result, can be configured by the end user extremely easily. Like the home dashboard for this user here, he can just click on the config and say, these are the particular elements in order I want them on this particular dashboard, my home dashboard. And by the way, on this dashboard, I want these particular charts that I've created and saved on this particular dashboard. These reports that I've created, or these reports that others have created and shared with me, these are what I want on my home dashboard when I first log in. Or when I come in here to do some project management, I might want a different set of charts and reports displayed for me, or I come in here to do some forecasting, some planning into the future. Again, these are the things I want to see. I want to see some capacity versus plan data on the headcount that I am responsible for, resource allocation representations, and so on. Now, in this case, I'm particularly interested in the ability to manage the submitted data, the timesheets, expense reports, and so on that come in. In fact, you see here that this user, as a result, on their home dashboard, they've got their approval queue placed right here at the top of their home dashboard. So it's showing them that they have approvals, primary or alternate approvals, awaiting them. So if this individual clicks into their queue, there they are, the timesheets, the expense reports, all awaiting their attention. Excuse me while I take a sip of water there. So I can go into any one of them and review. Let's go into, here's one from Clark. If I click into Clark's timesheet, I can see everything. I can see the approval history. If there had been changes made to this, I would also have the audit trail showing up, along with being able to see any comments that have been made on this timesheet. Now, but there's a big difference in Unanet about your role when you open up a timesheet to review it. You might be a manager or personnel manager, like this individual, or you might be a project manager. The difference being, while the personnel manager here can see everything on Clark's time card, a project manager, if they are also part of the review and approval process, would only be able to see that data that applies to the projects that they are managing. So if I'm the project manager for the 10.10 project, but these are not my projects, once the timesheet comes to me, I'm only going to see this data. Same thing on an expense report. All right. Then at this point, I'm able, of course, to approve it or disapprove it. In the DCAA environment, for instance, you would not be allowing your managers to access this edit button, because this would allow me to make changes to this time card and forward it on from here. In government contractors, this button is just at a system setting level. You just automatically hide this, and we don't have to worry about people accessing it. If you do disapprove a time card, though, notice that it's going to require you to comment on it, because of course, at whatever point in the approval process this happens, the time card is going to get sent back to the originator, in this case to Clark. So you got to let him know why you're disapproving it so he can take that action. Now, in addition to seeing that disapproved time card on his dashboard, the system can also notify Clark immediately that the time card was just disapproved, can show him the reason in that email, and again, have a link for him to take him right to that time card to solve those issues and resubmit. Now, if we go back to Chris Director's approvals, let's notice a couple things. There's expense reports waiting for him. If there were leave requests, they would also be showing here. But notice he's also got the ability to go down and see if he has any time cards, expense reports, leave requests that he needs to address as an alternate. In Unanet, there are many ways that you can designate others to act as alternates. You can allow someone, as you see here, for instance, to review and approve data while you are gone. So Fran, maybe she's on an extended vacation or maternity leave. While she's gone, she said, Chris, please review my time cards, my expense reports. So just by a click of configuration on her home dashboard, she's able to make that alternate designation, and now things are covered while she is gone, because hey, payroll and billing wait for no one, right? So in this way, all these things can automatically be taken care of. Now, we try to provide you with tools to help you manage these types of processes. One of the best examples is this timesheet status chart. Let me go and blow it up so it's a little clearer for you. Now, every one of these charts that you see on a Unanet dashboard, understand that they are fully interactive. That is, every segment on any chart is fully clickable. So for instance, I can click in here and I can see those individuals, their time card is missing, i.e. they haven't even started their time card for the current period yet. Now it's Tuesday, so that's of course a little bit of a problem. We may have already been receiving notifications from the system on these delinquent users, or we can just email them directly from here. But again, I can see something going on right here on my timesheet status chart for the current period, or I can click in and see those that are in use and how they are doing with their time accrual to this point. For those that have submitted their time card, I can see where those time cards still have to go. So, for instance, Chris himself can see he still has to approve all these folks, and then on these, Fran is also going to have to approve them after Chris approves them. But we've also got some project managers in the wings waiting to see this time card. George Washington is a project manager on these particular time cards that has to look at them. And we can give customers seats in the system and have them be part of the process if we so desire. All right. Now, if we go back to this chart, though, you see other categories that are in the approval process that are disapproved and awaiting that originator to fix the issue. But ultimately here, what we're trying to do as a manager or perhaps in accounting, we might also be monitoring this, because once we get this pie completely green, that's essentially our green light, our go indication that all timesheets are ready for downstream processes, payroll, billing, and so on. Okay? All right. With that in mind, and again, obviously, folks, there's lots more, but in the sake of time, just trying to show you some real high points here, some give you enough of a background on the concepts, types of things that Unanet can do for you. So perhaps down the road, we can get together for a far more detailed exploration of the particular areas that are most important to you in your particular company. Let me check and see if I have any other questions. Okay, no other questions at this point. So let's talk a little bit more about, we've been gathering data, right? Timesheets, expense reports, but let's talk about using that data. And of course, using it in real time. In the Unanet environment, as Charlie was entering time in that timesheet, anyone in the system, I mentioned this before, but let's see that, what that really means in action. Anyone, say a project manager, anyone who has access, of course, to these functions, these reports, to the data across a project or department or the corporation, what have you, can pull up any of, innumerable types of reporting mechanisms, whether they be tabular charts like this typical job status report, project status report, whatever you might call it, where for any given date range that we might designate on this project, we can see the labor, how the labor is building up. If we have subcontractors entering timesheets, their time costs might show up here, or if they're submitting on invoices, then it's going to show up here as an ODC. We can see not just those raw labor costs, literally, as for instance, if Charlie had just saved some additional time to his timesheet, and I hit this refresh report link right here, okay, this amount would update. I don't have to wait for that timesheet to be approved. I don't have to wait for the data to be posted to the GL, for the books to be closed for the week, the bi-month, or the semi-month, or the month. I can literally see it as it's happening. That data would change. The system is loading based on my cost structures and my current indirect rates, whether I want to use current provisional rates, target rates, or actuals rates that maybe I computed this morning based on all the actuals that have been accrued to this point in time. Then you see the system here in real time computing those indirect burdens and giving me, showing me the end game. Right along with that, being able to drill down, and for instance on the labor side, being able to drill down and see the details behind that direct labor. Note, that I've got so many hours with certain raw costs from Charlene, Dustin, and so on. Okay. Now, depending on your role, something like this may be very useful to you because you're trying to manage an individual project. And again, allowing you to do it in real time. At a management level, perhaps it's more a representation like where we take a similar data set, but we effectively rotate it 90 degrees. So as a manager, because perhaps I want to see all the projects in my department, so now I basically took that same data, just rotated it where I've got one line per project. All right, so for each project, I can see the direct labor, the subcontractor labor, so on and so forth out here. And what I'm probably looking at right away is something like this. How is each of these individual projects doing? Okay, where the red ink is, that's probably where my attention is first going to be drawn to those particular projects. Again, please remember, all of this is happening in real time. So at literally, moment to moment, day to day, week to week, as this is changing, I could even be monitoring this here on my dashboard on one of my screens on my desktop, and watching how this is just changing in real time. But given your role, there might be other types of data that are very important to you. You might very well want to see things like, how are my resources being utilized across, projects across the board, across departments, across the company. So things like this. In fact, let me expand this out a little bit more. Let's go back in time a little bit more, because in this case, I'm asking the system to show me actual booked time. Okay, not combining, say, actuals with my planned utilization going forward. So here I'm looking at the previous year of utilization. So in this biweekly or semi-monthly format that you see here, I can see that Chad had a pretty busy January. He was less utilized here in the second part of that month, and so on and so forth. Now, for any one of these instances, all I have to do is click on the user to drill down and see where that utilization level came from. So I can see here that he spent in the first half of January, he spent 100 hours on this content production project, and so on and so forth. Now, it looks like he only had one project he was working on. Perhaps if we go to someone else, let's check out Dustin, and we see, okay, he was working on a couple different projects. Now, this system can show me this type of data based on actuals like I'm looking at here, or instead maybe what I need to see because I am, say, the engineering manager who's responsible for all engineers, and I might be interested in the engineers that I have available for future work. I might go something more like a resource allocation version of this report, where I'm looking solely to the future, because as you see, we're looking at future periods here. This is obviously data that people are planned into, and as we can see right now, I perhaps have some issues. If I have very much work coming up that I need these particular types of engineers, I may have a problem with Carmen and Carolyn and Chad's utilization, because if I go any one of them, I can see they're very heavily utilized, and I can go in here and see how they've been planned out. Now, by the way, this may not necessarily be the whole story, because if I go back into the criteria for this standard report, please notice the point-and-click nature of reporting in Unanet that makes it remarkably easy for anyone to learn. At my last company, basically my project managers within a month were creating and editing their own reports. But I might come in here and say, you know what, please factor in the probability percent of any projects. And notice what happened here. Chad, Eleanor, who were heavily overutilized before, are now underutilized. And that is because, if I now click to their detail, in Unanet, these projects, this is obviously 100% probable project. This is obviously a current active project. But I've got a couple in here that are not necessarily active projects. I've got one that's 50% likely. These are obviously opportunities at various stages of my business capture lifecycle, right? And so what I told the system was, go ahead and factor Eleanor's planned utilization by those probabilities. All right. So now I perhaps get a little more accurate representation of how she's likely to be utilized in those future periods. Again, all in real-time data. If I have project managers or engineering managers planning those people right now, and I click the refresh button, I'm going to get the most current view of their future utilization. So perhaps that's, again, a different management level. But what about something like the financial management level, say in the accounting department, or a billing specialist. You might need something more along the lines of a billing and revenue summary report, where, again, in real time, Unanet is able to show you whether it's a cost plus contract, a time material contract, a fixed price contract, where everything stands project by project, on all charges that have been billed to this moment. And by the way, anything you see in blue in any Unanet screen or report can be clicked down to get the detail. So if I click into that amount there, Unanet will literally pull up all of it. Please excuse my laptop. I'm running the entire demo the entire system from my laptop right now. It's a very efficient platform. But just by clicking on that, I can literally see every detail of charge that has ever been billed to this customer on any invoice. And of course, I can see the invoices right here. Drilling down into those invoices is also a snap. But let me go back to the Billing and Revenue Summary Report to point out the fact that notice that Unanet can also both do this for you from a financial reporting perspective, but also display it to you, allow you to utilize completely different billing billing schedules from revenue recognition schedules. If I look at this fixed price project here, notice that I've currently billed 1.46, but I'm only recognizing 1.442. Now, maybe I am billing based on an actual fixed billing schedule, but recognizing based on percent complete. No problem. Unanet has the ability to do that. That structure can pretty much be whatever you want. Notice I've also got some deferred time here. But the bottom line is, again, for a billing specialist, the real-time reporting, and in fact, as they are running the billing process, they will literally see as they post data, labor, and expenses to be billed, they will see that those amounts show up here in the unbilled amounts. As they create draft invoices, they will be able to see those amounts move there and then review those draft invoices, or have project managers review those draft invoices prior to finalization and billing of the customer. And then, of course, with finalization, those amounts finally moving into the total billed amount for that customer in the current period. Perhaps you are interested in the way your labor resources are being utilized, and actually having just refreshed my demonstration database. Let me see. Oh yeah, okay, here we go. An example of a burn rate report. Once again, because we're in January here, right now we've got this, I'm pretty sure, set up to current calendar year. Yep, it certainly is. Let's just go ahead and obviously we don't have a lot of actuals data yet because we're still in January. So let's go ahead and look at, previous calendar year. We can use any of those dynamic date ranges, so this report moves through time. But bottom line here is now I can see how everything went against with the planned hours I was expecting to utilize versus what was actually utilized month by month, being reflected here on the left axis, and then cumulative totals in my lines here being reflected on the right axis. And just like that timesheet status chart, any element, all right, of these interactive charts, I can click into to see the detailed data, all right, behind that portion of the chart, all right, again being reflected in real time. Okay. Now, with that in mind, I'm gonna in the little bit of time I have left, and actually let me go back here and see if I've got any. Oh, okay, another question here. Oh, looks like I got a couple more. Hold on a second here. Let me try to address at least one or two more, and then we'll see if I get to show you my favorite report or not. Let's see. Time posted to projects at person's cost rate to direct labor. Does it post to GL or see through project reporting in Unanet? If in GL, so reduces wages account. Okay. Well, first let me. Some of the wording on that question is a little difficult, but let me mention a couple things based on what I'm kind of hearing in the beginning of this question. Time posted to projects at person's cost rate to direct labor. Does it post to GL or see through project reporting? Okay. In Unanet, again, based on your role, this is going to be completely up to you. As a project manager, you can see that as that cost data as someone is entering time in their timesheet, based purely on that timesheet. Okay, what has been entered in that timesheet? For instance, in something like, let me use this report where I am seeing the labor as it's accruing against that project as it happens. Now, if I go back to the criteria for this report, notice here that I can decide whether I want to see this data, whether I want the data that is being used in the report to be based on real-time data, that is anything that has been entered in a time card or expense report and saved by the user, okay? Or base it only on that data that has been posted. So obviously, if you're in the accounting department, you're probably living day-to-day mainly in posted data. If you're a project manager, you're probably working in real-time data. And we even have some levels of data, maybe data that has been approved but has not been posted yet. So that is completely dependent on you in real time to look at the data the way you would like to. Now, with that, I notice I've got about 30 seconds left. So let me just thank you. As I said, I know there's some other questions here. We will get answers back to you immediately on those questions. And please feel free to contact us about getting much further demonstrations. There's so much more here, folks, and I would love to show you that favorite report of mine. So get with us and let's get together and dive, get our hands much dirtier, diving into specific areas of the platform that might be most important to you. Thank you very much for your time today, and please enjoy the rest of your week.